Hey, hello, everyone. Hope you're having a great day. He is Paul Gerard. I am Kevin Kelly. We are Gerard & Associates. Check us out at gerardassociates.com. This is the G&A Way podcast. Thank you for tuning in. Paul, once again, great to be with you. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I want to put you on the spot. Would that be okay?
Yeah, go ahead. Knock yourself out.
All right. Who's QAing the QA guy? Who's CQI and CQI over at our shop? How's that?
Yeah. Good topic. So, think about this for a second. Of all the MS systems that you know of, who that have a QA system of some sort, right? A CQI system of some sort. How many of those do you know get some sort of validation that their QA process is doing well, right? Do any of them have in-house QA who QAs the QA folks that you are aware of?
Well, I would say the CAS accredited organizations that go in with a team of 2 to 3 people.
But they're not doing the nuts and bolts day to day.
Review the systems QA program during their initial and their reaccreditation.
That's not what I'm talking about, though. What I'm talking about is you've got an auditor and a QA coordinator who's going in to verify that the job they're doing is being done properly. Right? Because the CAS site reviewers look at policies and procedures. They look at kind of global, overall, overarching stuff, but they don't say to the auditor, let me see some of your run reports you've audited. I want to audit them myself and see if you're doing a good job auditing. Right? They don't do that level of scrutiny, do they?
Well, no. They don't take that report, run it through a unbiased protocol, come out with a score and present that score. But the medical director in the CAS accreditation team does go into depth. We do read run reports.
Right.
But yeah, I mean that's done.
Yeah.
But is it done daily? Is it CQI 365?
Right.
Is there somebody validating the process more routinely than that?
Yeah.
I'm drawing a blank, Paul.
Yeah. So we have a whole program. What's that, Kevin?
Hey, I'd say, I would bet Acadian Ambulance is doing it. I would bet that they probably CQI the CQI people, but it's total conjecture.
Right. Well, let me tell you what we do. So, and maybe agencies can take some points from this and incorporate it into what they do. You've got this robust, wonderful CQI process. You got a whole department. You got people in that department who are working diligently and hard every day to try to make sure that patient care quality is being maintained. And, the problem with the whole CQI process is it's a highly subjective process, right? So people who are reading the run report, we know without doubt that very often people have differing opinions about whether quality was actually obtained on any given call, right? So one of the things we do is we send it through different layers of people to review that call. The auditor reviews it, the medical director reviews it, and the QA coordinator all review it, and then we review it with the provider. We want to get all different opinions. And what we found over the years is that there are very much differing opinions about what constitutes quality. We'll audit a call and say to the medical director, hey, they should have ALS this guy. And the medical director sometimes will say, yep, I agree. Other times will say, nah, I don't see a problem with them not ALSing it. And any number of calls, hey, they should have done a 12 lead. And sometimes they'll agree, sometimes they won't. And interestingly, we'll shop those same calls around to different medical directors and we get different medical director opinions. When we get really interesting cases, something that doesn't happen often, sometimes, that medical director will weigh in and we'll read the report and say, geez, is there room to look at this in a different fashion? And we obviously don't give away, the information of who the providers were and who the agency was or any of that stuff, but we, copy and paste the narrative and, some of the vitals and skills stuff and send it to other people and say, what do you think of this? What are your thoughts? And they'll come up with a completely different answer than what the agency's medical director came up with. So there's a lot of subjectivity. So the point I'm making is that if you're in-house doing your in-house QA stuff, the assumption is that whatever they say goes. But that's not always a true assumption. So who's making sure that the auditors reviewing calls are auditing the calls properly and that they're pulling out the relevant facts and that they're actually scoring it however they score it, or flagging it, or directing it down whatever pathway it needs to go down from a CQI process standpoint? Who's making sure those folks are doing the right job? So we analyzed that over the years ourselves, and we said, we need to make sure that our folks are doing a good job, so that if there's any improvement on our end that needs to be had, that we can do that. And so we actually have multiple programs for that. So for the auditors, for example, we separate the auditor function from the CQI coordinator function here. And the reason is we want multiple opinions, so we get at least those two opinions on every call. But the other is we don't want the bias of the coordinator, whose job it is to go and talk to providers about their cases and their calls and to guide them to higher levels of quality. We don't want them to simply say yay or nay, without that second opinion.
So just a quick comment on the organizational chart. You mentioned auditor position and a coordinator position. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about how that is structured? Who reports to who? What is the dotted lines?
Okay, so we have a number of auditors who work for us, and those folks primarily just audit run reports, and that's their primary function. And we provide them a detailed training and then ongoing in-house QA, and they report directly to my operations manager. So he's the one who trains them, hires them, trains them, makes sure they're doing what they're supposed to do, that sort of thing. But and then a coordinator, conversely, the coordinators are the folks who go and do the interactions at the agencies with the individual providers, and they do the teaching, coaching, and mentoring on the calls with the individual providers. So we don't let coordinators audit calls from the agencies they coordinate at to prevent that bias. We want different views, and those coordinators report to me, so I kind of supervise their activities. Mm-hmm. And so what happens is, for the auditors, for example, they come on board after they're trained, and we track them for a while, rereading their run reports after they get trained and oriented, and we cut them loose. It's a very detailed process. They go through several hours of training on how to audit a call, how to enter the stuff into the database, how to score things. And then we give them some test audits to do. They do that with the ops manager. Then the ops manager will generally give them a batch of calls to do on their own, but then he, behind the scenes, will reread them and make sure that everything's done the way that we want it done. So that's the immediate orientation type process to make sure that we get them off on a good footing before we kick them loose. After we kick them loose, we have a separate individual who is the senior auditor. And our senior auditor's job is to, every month, pull a sample of an auditor's reviews and re-review the call. So we have a report that shows what the auditor scored the call, what comments the auditor mentioned about the call that they thought were relevant, and then his job is to re-review that call and say, I agree with the auditor's stuff. I found minor discrepancies in the audit that wouldn't really necessarily change anything. Or there are major discrepancies where they completely missed the boat on scoring this one, type of stuff. Mm-hmm. And after he compiles that report of the sample of calls for that auditor, he sends that report to the operations manager, who then reviews it and presents that information back to the auditor and sits and goes through the calls and say, just like we do with individual providers, let's go through those calls. Let's analyze the call together. Let's see what issues you found or maybe didn't find that the other senior auditor recommends that you probably should have, and let's see if there's validity. Do we agree? And again, because of the subjective nature of this, there are times where the ops manager will say, I disagree with the senior auditor. I think you actually audited this the way we would like you to. Or he'll say, the senior auditor mentioned that you completely blew the fact that they didn't do something for this patient that they should have done, and you completely missed that. And then we train the auditor just like we would a paramedic, right? Let's go through this and be careful what you do, be careful how you enter your data. So that's one way that we provide feedback back to the auditors to make sure that they're getting it right and that they're doing a good quality improvement job. Another loop that we have is when the coordinators go and discuss these cases, because remember, the senior auditor is only pulling a sampling of calls. And, you pull a sample and it might be a favorable sample, it may be a less than favorable sample, but it may not be truly representative of the overall body of work of that auditor. So we want to make sure there aren't any other critical misses. So another thing that happens is when the coordinator goes and discusses these cases with the paramedic or the EMT, and they review the case, they're in the back of their head, they're also looking at this and going, the auditor didn't mention a couple of points which I would have mentioned. After reading the run report with the paramedic and discussing the case, there's a couple of things they didn't mention that I thought they should have that are important. Or they're mentioning things that are really kind of nitpicky and they're not really relevant to this particular, to the overall patient care. And if they see a trend of that, they'll take those calls, send them back to the ops manager and say, hey, I was in such and such an agency doing some reviews with providers. I noticed that Auditor 22, made these comments on these calls. Take a look at these calls and let me know if I'm reading it right. Perhaps I'm wrong and the auditor's got it right. And so our ops manager will review those issues as they come up. And then if there's a need, present them back to the auditor and say, hey, here's some more information for some calls. Let's go through these calls as well. So the auditors get quite a bit of oversight in terms of making sure they're doing the job right and getting it as right as they can get it.
And how are these CQI auditors handling that feedback? Do you find that it might be similar to, say, me, for example, on the truck back in the day, getting butt hurt?
Yeah.
Or are they, and obviously you're not ripping them a new one. I mean, you're teaching, coaching, and mentoring, and that's what the entire organization is. It's a ever-increasing concentric circle of teaching, coaching, and mentoring and QIing each other.
Absolutely.
So how are they handling this?
Most of them handle it really well because, we explain it upon hire. That's what we do. We feed it back to them the same way. And, with my ops manager, just like with everybody else, I'm always encouraging the teaching, coaching, mentoring part, right? It doesn't work you screwed up and you did a bad job. So, we try to use the same types of techniques with our own staff in terms of being constructive and helpful and trying to guide them along the right path. But human nature is human nature, right? So, when we hire an employee, you never know, just like with EMS agencies, when they hire an employee, they never know what they're really getting until after they've hired that person. And, they look good on the interview, and sometimes they're not necessarily as wonderful as you thought they were going to be in the interview. Some have difficulty getting feedback. So, but by and large, they accept it well. They make their adjustments, and then we can see from the calls that get processed after downstream, we can see whether those, recommendations took or not with the individual auditor. So the vast majority of them, 95% of the time, the auditor's like, yeah, okay, I see where you're going. Or they'll say, no, I really think differently. I think that this is kind of a bigger issue, and I get where you guys are going with it, but I just my opinion is that this is different. And again, we'll seek out other opinions. So if that happens, my ops manager will usually give me a call and say, hey, we're discussing this case, take a look at it. The senior auditor said something different from the auditor auditor disagrees, I kind of agree with one or the other, but there was a lot of debate going back and forth. What do you think? And sometimes we'll even forward those to medical directors. From a medical director standpoint, what do you think of this topic? Again, the issue is, though, different medical directors view things in different ways. So these are all just various opinions. Ultimately, we come down to what is going to be the most constructive and helpful feedback we can give to the provider. So regardless of what the call was scored, was the comment a valid comment? So whether it's a 3 or 4 is less important than the fact that it was identified and we can discuss it with the provider to make sure that they understand what the issue is.
Somewhat off topic, but on the topic of CQI, G&A's relationship with the Office of Emergency Medical Services. Mm-hmm. We are a known commodity. We are a very valuable commodity, and we have been found by the state to be very worthwhile in helping agencies improve their quality. Would that be a fair statement?
Well, I can't speak on their behalf, and we deal with multiple OEMS agencies up here in the Northeast, but I can tell you that we do get calls from OEMS up here in the Northeast and a couple of different OEMS agencies actually giving our name out to clients. Clients will call us and say, hey, we had a problem. We had a bad inspection. OEMS gave us your name, and they may have given other names as well. I don't know, but I do know we get that. I've gotten calls from OEMS folks directly saying, hey, expect a call from this agency because they had a really bad, experience on their inspection, and they're probably going to be calling you. So I would assume that's because they feel that there's some validity to what we do.
And you certainly have never been criticized by a state agency for the presentation of your CQI product.
No, not that they've mentioned to us. In fact, when they go into agencies for their inspection, when they know that we're working with them, they'll say, hey, let me see your last trimester report from G&A. And so they'll actually request that data from the agency. So many of the agencies, when they know OEMS is going down for their inspection, they'll call us up and they say, hey, there's other data or reports that I'd like to have in case they ask for it. Can you give me this stuff? So there are some agencies where when the OEMS inspector goes to do their inspection, the chief will have me go in, or one of our guys go in during the inspection so that we can answer QA-related questions for OEMS. So we've had that happen. So I take that all to be that they're reasonably supportive of our system and our scoring and what we do, and that they find it to be at least reasonably reliable.
And unbiased, and they're aware of the internal controls in place, the internal CQI controls in place.
I don't know if they're aware of our internal CQI controls because
now
we haven't had. Yeah, they are now. If they listen to the G&A Way podcast, they are now. But I know that they know that. I think that they know that we're pretty detailed, and if anything could be flagged for potential improvement, that's what we do. So I think, interestingly, for the Debbie Downers, the folks who don't like being QA'd, and there's always some in every agency, right? They complain that, these guys are nitpicky. They were not with me in the street when this was occurring. I had to make a judgment call, and they give all those standard lines. Yeah, everybody. I've used it too back before I was doing QA.
You weren't there. So, how do you know?
Yeah, exactly. So, I know that one inspector has said to me, when they say that, I have a high degree of confidence that you're doing a good job, because if they're complaining that you're being too nitpicky, it means that you guys are being really detail-oriented. So I like the term detail-oriented. I don't like the term nitpicky, but I do like the detail-oriented portion. And we're very detail-oriented. If somebody could argue it could be done differently, let's have that discussion. So a lot of calls get flagged for discussion that ultimately turn out to be fine after the discussion, after we learned in depth the provider's clinical decision making on that particular call. A lot of them turn out to be perfectly fine. It just wasn't, perfectly clear in the run report. So we know a lot of them ultimately will get downgraded and turn out to be nothings, but they're good conversations to be had anyway, because there's a lot to be discussed and learned from that call, even if ultimately the QA process said, okay, things are okay with this call and there's nothing else for you to do. There's still a lot of this good discussion that happens around those discussions.
Key takeaways, Paul. Key takeaways on the CQI and the CQI.
Yeah, so I think that you need to be monitoring the monitors, right? So if you're doing in-house CQI, how do you know that process is working well? And, I mentioned the auditors, but we also CQI the coordinators, right? That's what I do. So on the back end, I'm looking at work that they do to see if it's meeting what my standard as the owner of the business, is it meeting the standard that I think they should be meeting? And I'm looking to see that their comments are relevant to the providers, that they're structuring their comments in a positive feedback mechanism sort of way, and that sort of thing. And then, there's other things agencies can do, right? I think it's incumbent upon the chief of department to get out on the apparatus floor and go talk to people and ask them, how is the QA process working for you? Is it helping you? Is it coaching you up and teaching you and mentoring? Or do you find that they're being, assholes in terms of just coming to you and busting your balls? Yeah. So can we say that on a podcast, or we need to edit that out later?
No. We're okay.
Okay. Let me know when we're not okay, which is,
I think we're good.
That's the fox god in the hen house.
I think that's a really important point. Mm-hmm. And that's a really important leadership point, is if you care about CQI and you care about your guys, you want to get down there and you want to ask questions. And that's exactly right. Is it adding value to your EMS practice, or is it deflating you?
Right.
Because we would want that feedback.
Yeah. CQI done improperly has a terribly negative, destructive effect.
Yeah.
People get really upset when they feel like you pick on me for stuff, but you don't mention the same things to the other guy, and he does things worse than me, and yet you're coming to me all the time.
Yeah.
So you need to weed that stuff out of the system. You have to have a process that's fair and equitable to everyone, and that everybody's treated the same way, and treated the same way with respect and dignity, not just treated the same way in a rough house, I smack everybody around equally sort of way.
Right.
So if you're chief of service, you need to get out there, talk to your providers, and say, "Listen, I know everybody doesn't love CQI, and people reading your stuff, and we get that, we understand that. But is it more helpful or more harmful to you? Is it helping you in your hone your craft as a provider, or is it creating animosity based on how it's being done?" And, there's surveys you can send out asking the same thing if you want to keep it anonymous. So there's different ways, but you want to make sure that you're going back and checking the work of the folks who are charged with doing CQI properly to make sure that they are, in fact, doing that job well.
I think that internal customer service is an incredibly important point, both for our company, but for the agencies that we serve. And it goes without saying that we want feedback. Our goal is to continuously improve this product, and we want to get it right.
Right.
We want to be number one. We want to be the best, and we need feedback to do that.
And the vast majority of providers out there feel the same way, right? They really do want to do a good job. They really do want to get some meaningful feedback. They really do want to get better at what they do. Give them what they want. Give them what they need. So if you want to say that you're a top-notch quality patient care service, prove it. Prove it with your CQI system, and prove that your CQI system is able to handle the task at hand of accomplishing that in a constructive way.
And we want the courageous conversations. If you think we have opportunities to improve, we want that feedback. What else, Paul?
Well, that's it. You got, at the CQI level, you want to make sure that everybody's doing their jobs properly by having some sort of mechanism to do that. And at the administrative level, you want to make sure that the overall overarching CQI process is meeting the needs of the agency. And again, there are a variety of ways to do that. But get out there and talk to people, find out if it's working, find out if it's helping them, find out if it's identifying real problems as opposed to, misidentifying areas for improvement, and work off of that.
All right. Well, I thought this conversation was fantastic. CQIing, the CQI guys, we want feedback. We really appreciate you listening to the podcast. If we can do anything to help you, please reach out. Check us out on GerardAssociates.com. Again, have a great day. Be safe. Stay in the fight, and Godspeed.
Goodbye, everybody. Have a good day.
On 5.